The importance of Jesus Christ to pagans. As a child, I was drawn to fantasy, particularly to fairy tales. I took them very seriously and quickly adopted much of their moral codes, especially the messages in the books of George MacDonald. At the age of 12, I'd started going to church looking for something. I didn't want to find community, I wanted to find God, the God of the mountains and storms and winter. All I found was that I lacked the ability to believe, and I didn't want to be a hypocrite. I tried many religions, going to temple or trying out Buddhism or Sufism, but nothing rang true. I had started seeing patterns in fantasy and began to read anything I could of mythology and folklore. Sir James Frazer recorded records of British rituals and those of the continent. Robert Graves, after his work on the Romans, did a lot of analysis on the gods, rituals, and calendars. And Joseph Campbell did a great amount of work on rituals, but settled onto one particular ritual, common in primitive cultures of the equatorial belt, that he thought evolved into the holy marriage of the gods. This ritual, to create and keep fertility in the earth, he began to see everywhere in the form of a god or a path he called the hero's journey. I found the violence of the holy marriage to be appalling. There was a ritual story of Osiris being killed and chopped up only to be reincarnated by Isis. The story was also common among the ancient Greeks, with many versions of which Dionysus is the most familiar. Know the story, and you can also follow the hero king as his own body is substituted for that of an animal or slave, as in the rituals of Mithras. Pagans seeing these stories have said that the story of Jesus is too similar and just stolen by the church. The story always begins with a young man from a normal family. In fairy tales, he is always the youngest son, a bit of a fool, but extremely lucky. In Campbell's map, he hears the call of adventure, goes on a mission to save his people, and returns. His story is extremely popular. However, this ignores the darker parts of the ritual king story. He rises up into the world, having created a new life in the great marriage, tries to protect his people, becomes a tyrant, and must offer himself as a sacrifice to pass the kingdom to his son. The brilliance of George Lucas is not in his adherence to the hero's journey, but in his creation of Anakin Skywalker, whose path is one of the only depictions of the complete ritual in popular fiction. In my own work, I have tried to show young men trapped in this ritual of the sacrificial king. The sacrificial king. In ancient rituals, the king had a temporary position. He was chosen by the gods for his luck, and when he had absorbed all the bad luck of the people, he had to be killed. We still see this death in rituals like the death of the old year. In ancient times, a slave substitute was chosen, treated like a king for a short while, and then sacrificed. The Jews, as with many ancient peoples, started substituting animals for sacrifice. We still use the word scapegoat to signify a sacrificial person. The story of Jesus is tangled and begins with the complex politics of Herod and his sons and their controversial rule of Judea. Robert Graves, in his work studying the Caesars, verified the death of Jesus and his claim to the throne of Judea. In his book, King Jesus, he uncovers the story as he discovered it. We are told the story today of a gifted boy who dazzled the elders of the temple and then went into the desert and returned to preach a way of life that was a body of compassion and tolerance, similar to the other heart religions of the Jains and the Buddhists. People still argue over Jesus' claim to the throne. The best sources trace his ancestry from King David through his mother. We do know that Pontius Pilate thought him innocent of citing a rebellion against the empire, but the fear was strong. There had been unsuccessful rebellions against both the Hellenistic and Roman empires, and the punishment was usually death by crucifixion. In his Narnia series, C.S. Lewis conveys a critical point in the sacrifice ritual. The witch calls for the death of a traitor, and Aslan, in offering himself as a substitute, invokes a more ancient magical law that will resurrect him. The fact that Jesus was innocent is a key element of the sacrifice, which Pilate verifies. In his testimony, Jesus talks about the truth, implying that he is the king awaited for, but he is innocent of a rebellion against Rome, even discouraging his followers against refusing to pay taxes. The fact of his innocence makes him a victim and a martyr. In my own book, someone wonders how to stop the cycle of king sacrifice, and the answer is that it would take a great and final sacrifice, like that of the Son of God, to stop the practice of human sacrifice. This we can again see in very early writings where Paul and John agree that Jesus died for the sins of others. The role of the goddess. The early Christians did not abandon Mary. Christianity was a heart religion where service to others, compassion, and poverty were a practice, not an idea. In early writings, the Holy Spirit was the female aspect of the Trinity. Mary was cast in her compassionate mother phase and has remained an essential brake on church politics, inviting in worshipers who look to her as a Western Kuan Yin, a mother, friend, and a downtrodden woman all in one. She is similar to the gentler aspects of the great goddess, ignoring the darker side where this goddess controlled both life and death, and her dark aspect was the crone of the old moon, who was a mortuary guardian. Christianity was more focused on the earth aspects of spirituality, or the passage of the king from lucky lad to a king. The church took advantage of this and began to rule like a king on earth, with displays of powers, a hierarchy, warriors to protect itself, and convert pagans to the kingdom and punish them if they refused the call. When the Protestants rebelled, there followed huge holy wars with massive pogroms on all sides, as if the king and the dark queen were running amok over the faithful and divergent alike. In the argument over transubstantiation, you can see the movement from the actual body of the sacrificial king to the idea of eating the body of the sacrificial king. The loss of Odin. Although the great sacrifice of Jesus was able to stop human sacrifice across Europe, the invasion of the church into the north ignored the hierarchy of the gods already in place. In the south, Zeus and Jove ruled the pantheons. Both of these gods were vegetative kings out of the sacrificial king rituals. The hierarchy spread north, but it was ruled by trickster gods from the shaman tradition. Odin was not associated with the oak, like Thor, who was not a head god in the north. The god of the south was also a sky god, crowned by pomegranate, the apple, and other signs of vegetative renewal. He was a leader of nations and a king of kings. The northern gods were tricksters, old men who were both feared and shunned, associated with shape-shifting and birds, ruling with riddles and wisdom, cajoling and tricking rather than smiting and attacking. This was the first great break. While freeing the north of human sacrifice, the church also made the ruling god into the devil. Southern religions had always cast down this lonely shaman into hell. Turning from the dark goddess. In most pantheons, you could see a hint of an ancient goddess who was connected to animals, fire, healing, and later spinning. As the pantheon became separated by gender, her role as a fire goddess was confined to keeping the sacred fires, while her role as a smith became part of the role of the god of the underworld. In the north, she was the goddess of winter, the aurora and the stars, which later she spun from her silver wheel. But fire was essential for survival during the long winters, and Europe was late in abandoning the hunt. Among the ancient pantheons of the north, we see Freya, goddess of youth and death, with her lions now seen as cats, but also Frigg, responsible for taking the souls to the next life. Frigg was the spinner of stars, but also of fate, seen all over Europe as the triple split of the three fates. This goddess was the judge of souls, but also the great Bridget, who was so important that she retained her role as a saint, where she is still depicted with her hammer, her staff, her book, and her chalice of fire. It is important not to confuse her with the triple goddess, for her past trap is destruction, not eating the dead. The best depiction of this goddess is in the work of George MacDonald, where we see her with her spinning wheel, her birds, but also as a protector of miners. She is a healer, but also a judge. Most modern Europeans are spiritual orphans trying to get by on Christianity, which works well for some but not for others. There is an amazing opportunity to rescue much of pre-Christian practice from the dark, but each person follows their own path to the place where they may be centered and embark on a spiritual journey. I see so many people and organizations get lost in the traps of these paths. People on the mental path get locked up in schools where they spend careers defending ideas or manipulating those that they think are stupid. Those on the body path get obsessed with youth and the decay of the body, trying to keep control of health and fitness. Those on the earth path fall into nationalism and paranoia, fearing to lose power, markets, or social identity. The followers of Jesus believe his words of compassion and temperance. The church helped destroy the cults of human sacrifice, but became admired in their own spiritual power. Wiccans tend to fall into the trap of Kali, believing that life and death are of the same coin. But most pagans are lost, grasping at straws, shamanism, or old gods. I have a body of work untangling most of these paths so that you can understand how you feel and what you hold sacred. I'm not saying that Christianity, Buddhism, or Islam won't work for you, but that spiritual practice must align with your own mythology and psychology. Join me as I dive into laying this out for you. Blessed be.